A simple woman was mocked at her job interview, until the CEO walked in and called her chairwoman. Before I said a single word in that room, they had already decided I didn't belong there. You can always feel it. That shift in air when a room turns cold, not from the temperature but from judgment. It hit me the moment I stepped into the reception area of Ardent Technologies. The place looked like it had been carved out of a startup brochure: glass walls, brushed steel everything, a wall-length digital waterfall behind the front desk that whispered serenity while every person who passed by glanced at me like I had wandered in off the wrong elevator. I clutched my folder tighter. Light blue kurta, ironed straight. My mother's old leather tote, weathered but clean. My resume was inside. So were 2 degrees, 7 years of experience, and a letter of recommendation from a senator. None of it would matter in about 10 minutes. The receptionist gave me the kind of smile you reserve for someone about to be asked to leave. "Interview?" she asked, blinking at my shoes. "Yes," I replied, soft but clear. "Sarah Khan. Final round. 10:30. She checked her screen. Her eyebrows lifted a half-inch, surprised. "Oh, right. Just take a seat. They'll call you." The seat was a bench with no cushion, parked beneath a giant photo of the company's executive team, all smiling, all sharp-jawed, all white. I sat down, crossed my ankles, and waited. That's when I heard them. The door to the conference room was open just enough to let sound spill through. 2 voices, male and female, low, laughing. "Is that her?" "I think so." "Wow. She looks like she just walked in from the library. She's gonna cry when we ask her about executive energy." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just stared straight ahead at the corporate photo and forced myself to count the ceiling lights. 15. 16. 17. Then a third voice, male, older, firmer, joined from somewhere further back. "Play nice. Someone's always watching." It silenced them for about 10 seconds. Then, "Whatever. Let's keep this one short." The door opened. "Sarah Khan," the woman said, voice crisp. I stood, smoothed my kurta, and walked in. Liam was first, buttoned up, 30-something, hair too gelled to be accidental. He offered a hand that barely closed around mine. Amber followed, early 40s, perfectly accessorized, lip gloss like a lacquer finish. She didn't shake my hand. Just motioned toward a chair. I sat. They didn't. Liam paced. Amber flipped through a printed resume. "So, Sarah," Liam began, "walk us through why you think you'd be a good cultural fit here." I smiled, polite. "I believe in building bridges, between departments, between skill levels, between backgrounds. My last role involved unifying an analytics team spread across 3 countries. We increased reporting speed by 43%. Amber looked unimpressed. "And what role did you play specifically?" "I designed the data model. Coordinated the feedback loops." Liam cut in. "But were you managing? Like managing? Or just assisting?" "I was the lead strategist on the project." Amber tilted her head. "That's not the same as being an executive. There's a difference in presence." "Presence?" I asked. "Executive presence," she clarified, with the smile of someone who'd practiced that line in the mirror. "You understand." I didn't, but I nodded. Liam leaned back. "Honestly, you're probably better suited for something operational. Support adjacent. Behind the scenes." That was when it clicked. This wasn't a real interview. It was a box to check. I was the inclusive candidate. The token. The resume in her hand might as well have been written in invisible ink. I wanted to speak. Wanted to call it what it was. But I thought of my mother halfway across the city in a dialysis clinic, still telling nurses proudly, "My daughter's going to be a director." So I swallowed the acid in my throat. "Thank you for your time," I said, voice steady. Neither stood as I left. As I passed the frosted glass wall near the exit, I glanced sideways, and saw him. An older man, silver hair, black suit, no name badge. He was watching. He didn't look away. I had made it to the parking garage before the tears came. Not sobbing, just that tight pressure cooker heat behind the eyes that makes everything blurry for a few seconds. I wiped them fast. No one was going to see me crack. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Miss Khan," a voice said. "Come." Confident. "Yes." "This is James Harrington. I'd like you to come back upstairs." I blinked. I just finished my interview." "Yes," he said. "And now I'd like to interview them." There was a pause. Then, "Please meet me in the boardroom." I looked at my reflection in the side mirror of my car. Eyes puffy. Hair slightly windblown. Face tired. But something inside me was already waking up. Something fierce. I turned, squared my shoulders and walked back inside. By the time I reached the boardroom, my hands had stopped shaking. But just barely. The receptionist didn't ask where I was going this time. She just looked up, recognized something different in my stride and lowered her eyes. The boardroom sat behind two smoked glass double doors, heavy enough to make a point. I pushed them open and was met with the kind of silence that fills skyscrapers, thick, air-conditioned, important. James Harrington stood at the head of the long oak table. He wasn't what I expected from a man whose name appeared on investor calls and Forbes leadership blurbs. No arrogance. No flash. Just a composed, unreadable presence. The kind that forces people to fill the silence with their own insecurity. He motioned toward his seat. Please. I sat. He didn't open with small talk. Didn't ask how my day was going. Just folded his hands and said, I owe you an apology. I blinked. You don't? He raised a hand. Miss Khan, I watched that interview. I've worked too long to mistake polite bias for professionalism. What I saw wasn't just disrespectful. It was a failure of our people, of our culture, and of myself. I didn't know what to say. So he continued. 15 years ago, he said, my company had 3 employees, 1 working printer, and $250,000 in debt. The woman who handled the finances worked from her kitchen in Karachi. I never met her in person, but she saved us. My chest tightened. Her name was Aisha Khan. I nodded, stunned. She's my aunt. I thought so, he said, lips twitching. You look like her when you're about to fight someone with facts. For the first time that day I smiled. He reached into a folder and pulled out a simple white document. This was never a real interview, Miss Khan. Not for the job you thought. Liam and Amber were told you were an inclusion candidate for an open analytics role. What they didn't know was that you were also our final stage observer in a leadership pipeline initiative I created. My hands froze on the armrest. He nodded. They failed. I looked down. So, why am I here? Because I want to offer you something else. A new role still in development. One that will help us fix what we've allowed to rot. He slid a paper toward me, not a contract, a briefing. Strategic Cultural Audit Consultant, Confidential Oversight Tier. It was vague, open-ended, and powerful. You'd have internal access. HR transcripts, hiring flows, performance reviews. You observe. Quietly. Collect patterns, insights, proof. Then you help build the solution. Why me? He didn't hesitate. Because you know exactly what it feels like to be overlooked, and you didn't fold. I didn't accept right away. I asked questions. Many. And when I left the room 2 hours later, I had a security badge with a different color, not the temp kind, not the visitor kind. An internal pass. Level 3 access. They'd mocked me before I spoke. Now I was listening before they ever saw me coming. For the next 3 weeks, I did the quietest, most effective work of my career. No desk. No nameplate. I worked out of coffee shops, sat in the back of meetings, watched hiring panels from behind one-way glass. I wore what they never expected power to look like. Modest clothes, soft shoes, simple gold earrings. Liam never even looked twice at me. Amber greeted me once with a flat smile and forgot my name halfway through the sentence. I kept notes. Not just on their behavior, on the pattern. It wasn't just me. It never had been. A young man named Raphael got passed over after being told he lacked polish, despite having an Ivy League degree and patents under his belt. A black woman named Janine wasn't invited to a key client lunch, even though she'd built the entire pitch deck. A hijabi intern's resume was rewritten without her input, to be more palatable. It was everywhere. And it was normalized. That's when I met Arun. He was quiet, mid-50s, sat near the back of the IT floor, surrounded by cables and silence. We met when I was trying to trace email history on an HR document. He helped without asking questions. Until the 3rd time I showed up. You're not just auditing policy, he said, glancing over his glasses. You're auditing people. I didn't answer. He leaned back. I've been here since before the IPO. I've watched 3 rounds of leadership. You're the first person I've seen here in years who listens with intent. Why didn't you say anything? He gave a sad smile. I learned a long time ago that speaking truth in a place like this just paints a target on your back. I paused. What if we gave truth a desk instead? That's when I knew, this wasn't about catching bias. It was about dismantling it. From the inside. My report grew thicker by the day. Documented interviews. Time-stamped transcripts. Comparative performance data between promoted employees and their overlooked peers. I labeled it, Echo Chamber, How culture became currency at Ardent Tech. I included audio snippets, anonymized case studies, graphs that made denial impossible. Then I asked James Harrington for 15 minutes of board time. He gave me 30. When I walked into the top floor conference room that morning, something in the room shifted. I wasn't wearing armor. Just a soft gray blazer, a pearl pin my mother had mailed from Lahore, and my aunt's name echoing in my stride. The board sat waiting. 12 members. None of them had been at my interview. James stood, nodded, then introduced me simply. This is Sarah Khan. She's here to walk you through a mirror. I suggest we all look. I started with the numbers, then the patterns, then the stories, anonymized but undeniable. Halfway through, one of the board members leaned forward and whispered to another, "We've seen this before, haven't we?" And I realized they hadn't just been waiting for truth. They'd been waiting for someone brave enough to deliver it with calm precision. I finished my presentation with a quote from Aisha Khan, pulled from an archived email James had shared with me. Sometimes what's missing isn't talent. It's permission. Silence. Then applause. Real, stunned, unanimous applause. James stood again. "Miss Khan, would you be willing to continue this work formally?" "Yes," I said. "But I'd like to recommend one change." Everyone waited. "I'd like to stop calling it inclusion work. This isn't about inclusion. That implies they're guests in a house we already built. I want to help design a house where everyone has a key." That was the moment I knew something bigger had begun. Not revenge. Reconstruction. The next time I entered a conference room, no one looked through me. They looked at me. The placard in front of my seat didn't say applicant or consultant. It said, Sarah Khan, Strategic Oversight Chair. Black text, clean font, firm placement. Just like my voice would be. This wasn't a promotion. This was a reversal. And the people who tried to humiliate me, Liam, Amber, and a handful of others just like them, were about to experience a meeting they would never forget. James had kept the board's decision private until this very morning. No memos. No internal announcement. Just a simple calendar invite titled, Leadership Culture Reset, Attendance Mandatory. Room 37B was standing room only. I arrived 5 minutes early. Not to make a scene, just to be undeniable. Liam entered mid-conversation with Amber. Both stopped short when they saw me sitting at the head of the table. The same table I'd been dismissed from weeks earlier. He furrowed his brow. "Are we in the wrong room?" "No," I replied evenly. "You're right on time." Amber's eyes narrowed. "Who approved this seating arrangement?" James walked in behind them. "I did," he said. "Have a seat." They did, slowly, with the kind of hesitation that only exists when someone's used to being in control and suddenly isn't. I stood. "Today's session is not a workshop and it's not a review," I said. "It's a reveal." The projector lit up with the first slide. Echo Chamber, a diagnostic report on bias and gatekeeping in talent acquisition at Ardent Tech. There were no dramatic gasps. No storming out. Just silence. That heavy, corporate kind that means everyone is calculating their distance from the fire. I clicked forward. Slide by slide, I dismantled them, not by name, not by accusation, but by evidence. Charts comparing performance evaluations against promotion rates. Audio snippets of interview panels subtly devaluing minority candidates. Emails where words like polished and executive presence were used as codes for looks like us. I paused at one key slide. A quote. "Let's just keep this one short." I looked directly at Liam. His lips tightened. Amber shifted in her seat. "This session is being recorded for internal accountability," I said. "But for the sake of transparency, you'll all have access to a written transcript as well. Any statements you'd like to clarify can be included in your response forms." Someone coughed. I moved on. It wasn't about humiliating them. It was about showing everyone else what leadership had tolerated for too long. About halfway through, I paused the presentation and asked for volunteers. Has anyone here ever passed over a candidate because they didn't fit the culture? A few hands hesitantly rose. I nodded. Now keep your hand up if you ever challenged what that meant. All but one hand dropped. That hand belonged to Janine, the woman who'd been passed over for a client lunch. She spoke clearly. I challenged it. I was told to be a team player. I nodded. Thank you for your honesty. Then I turned back to the room. Now imagine how many voices like hers never even made it to this table. That was the moment the session changed. It went from exposure to awakening. After the presentation, I opened the floor, not to debate but to confession. And the confessions came. Julie from marketing, I've rewritten resumes without telling people. I thought I was helping. Read from finance. I've questioned people's credentials in meetings based on how they spoke English. I never thought about it. And then, slowly, eyes turned to Liam and Amber. Liam leaned forward, jaw tight. This feels personal, he said. It isn't, I replied. But if it lands personally, you might ask why. Amber tried to regain ground. Some of these conclusions are subjective. So were your hiring decisions. She didn't respond. James stood. For the record, we're not here to punish discomfort, he said. We're here to end harm. Some of you might not survive this shift professionally, but the company will. The room broke. Some applauded. Some sat still. Liam didn't speak again. Amber just stared at the screen like it had betrayed her. Later that day, HR circulated an internal memo. Effective immediately. Arden's interview panels must include diverse representation. Bias training restructured under external review. Culture fit removed as an evaluation metric. All hiring reviews retroactively audited by the new chair. That chair was me. The next few days unfolded like an earthquake in slow motion. Liam resigned. The email said it was to explore new ventures. Amber was reassigned, demoted really, to a non-client-facing role in compliance. I heard she cried in her office. I didn't celebrate. I just got to work. I created a mentorship pipeline for high-potential employees from underrepresented groups. I replaced the Inclusion Initiative with a real equity framework. I met with Janine privately and said, "You were right to speak. Now I want you helping us lead." She accepted. Then I called Raphael, the one with patents, and asked him to reapply. This time, the panel included 2 people he'd never met and one who looked like him. He got the job. When I walked into the office each day, no one looked at my clothes. They looked at my name tag. Because now it meant something. It meant change. The final part of this section, the unexpected twist, came 2 weeks later. I was walking down the hall when I saw Arun at his desk, surrounded by coils of cable and humming machines. He stood when he saw me. "I read your report," he said. "You wrote me in. You earned it." He smiled softly. "I've waited a long time to see someone like you at the front of the room." I smiled back. Then handed him an envelope. "Would you consider being our Director of Technical Culture and Legacy?" He opened it. "Read the title." His hand shook. "I'm not polished," he said. "You're the blueprint," I replied. By the time the quarter ended, Arden Technologies didn't look the same. The glass still gleamed. The email still pinged. The revenue still climbed. But the rooms felt different. I could feel it in the pauses, the kind that used to hover awkwardly when someone didn't look or sound like everyone else. Now those silences were shorter, filled with questions instead of judgment. I could feel it in the hiring panels. The resumes being read, not skimmed. The new faces and orientation. The laughter that didn't feel filtered. That kind of change doesn't start loud. It starts with a seat. Mine had a nameplate now. And not just one they slid across the table during meetings. It was engraved, Chairwoman, Strategic Equity Council. Brass, solid, warm to the touch. Sometimes I'd run my fingers along the edge without realizing it. Not out of ego. Out of memory. Of what it took to get here. And who they never expected would sit there. I wasn't the only one who rose. Janine took over recruitment reform. The first thing she did was ban the phrase executive presence from the evaluation rubric. Raphael launched an innovation lab with funding tied directly to internal referral pipelines. Arun became the new go-to for onboarding culture. On his first day with his new title, he stood in front of 37 new hires and said, "I used to hide at the back of the building. Now they pay me to speak up." Even James changed. He started coming to more meetings. Listening. Less founder mystique, more human investment. We didn't always agree. But he never stopped backing the vision. And the vision was simple. No one should need a miracle to be recognized. The public found out eventually. A journalist from Tech Circle Weekly got wind of the internal changes. She reached out requesting a quote. I almost declined. Then I remembered how many people read stories like mine and saw a warning, not a window. So I said yes. She interviewed me in a small garden courtyard behind the Ardent office. No lights, no hair and makeup, just a bench, a breeze and my truth. When the article dropped, the title read, "The Quiet One at the Head of the Table, How Sarah Khan Rewrote Arden's Playbook." It went viral. Not because it was loud, but because it was real. The article told the whole arc, from the interview I was mocked in to the invitation I almost didn't answer, to the changes we made without ever raising our voices. I received thousands of messages. From women in tech. From immigrant daughters. From older men who said, "My granddaughter just started her career. I sent her your story." I read them all. But the one that made me cry was this. "Dear Sarah, I watched your interview on YouTube. I showed it to my 10-year-old daughter. She asked, 'Can I be quiet and still lead?' I told her yes. Because of you. Priya N." Some days I still hear the voice from that first interview in my head. "Let's just keep this one short." And I smile. Because it wasn't short. It was the beginning. That phrase doesn't hurt anymore. Now it reminds me what happens when you underestimate someone who listens more than they speak. A month later we held a company-wide open forum. No dress code. No pre-screened questions. Just a microphone and space to speak. We called it Unmuted. Employees took turns sharing moments they'd felt overlooked. Dismissed. Boxed in. Some cried. Some didn't. But no one was ignored. Near the end a young man stood up, new hire, barely 22. He said, "I applied twice before. Got rejected both times. I rewrote my resume, changed my photo, changed how I described my hobbies. Still nothing." Everyone listened. Then he smiled. "This time I just told the truth. And someone here read it." That was Janine. I looked over at her and she nodded, fighting tears. That's the moment I realized, we didn't just fix a company. We changed its language. A week after the forum, I received a package at my desk. No sender name. Just a return address, Lahore. I opened it carefully. Inside was a small hand-stitched square of fabric with a familiar floral design, bright threads against cream cotton. Tucked inside was a note. "This was Aisha's. She would have wanted you to have it. Mama." I closed my eyes and held it for a long time. Grief doesn't vanish with victories. It weaves itself into them. But this didn't feel like pain. It felt like inheritance. My mother visited the office for the first time in spring. I gave her the tour, slow, quiet, dignified. She wore her favorite scarf. Every time someone passed us and nodded or said, "Hi, Miss Khan," she looked at me like she was watching a dream she never dared to speak aloud. In the boardroom I showed her the seat. She ran her fingers over the brass. "It's beautiful," she said. Then after a pause, "But it's not the best thing here." "What is?" "You," she said simply. I didn't reply. I just hugged her right there in the chair that started it all. It's funny. They thought I came for a job. But I didn't. I came for a seat. A real one. And now I build them. For everyone who thought they had to change themselves to be taken seriously. For everyone who was told their silence meant weakness. For everyone who walked into a room hoping to be tolerated and left knowing they were unwelcome. They'll find a seat here. Because someone quiet sat down once. And never stood back up.